All right, my watch says about 36 past the hour. Hilary, do you feel like it's time to go ahead and get started? All right, let's do
Yeah.
it. So I'm going to invite everybody. First of all, just a heads up that we are recording this session. That is mostly because we want to be able to give people the opportunity to receive this information and be a part of this conversation, even if they weren't able to make it at this exact time. So we are recording. And you may be wondering who I am. If you don't know who I am, my name is Damon Motz-Storey. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I served with the Quaker Voluntary Service in 2016 and 17. And I'm now the Assistant Clerk of the Board of Directors for QVS. And Hilary Burgin and I are going to be running this session. And we have a couple of breakout group facilitators as well. And Claire Hannapel, our amazing development coordinator on staff at QVS, is going to be doing tech stuff for us throughout the session. And I'm just going to invite everyone to start by just getting centered together. So if you are seated, if you could try to find a posture that is comfortable, maybe put your feet on the ground. And in any kind of a way, I invite you to sort of get into a posture that feels grounded. And join me in taking a couple of deep breaths. All right. Well, welcome, friends, from across the country, from places near to where I am to places far from where I am, whether it's 4:40 or 5:40, 6:40, 7:40. We are here gathered together across time zones and different parts of the world. And I'm so glad to be with you today. We are in such a unique period of time in the world. This is, I think such a, it's different from anything that I've ever known and ever experienced in my life. And I think that that's the same for so many of us. And, I feel called to mention the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade and all of the many, many other people who have been killed by the police. And I say those names, and I also want to speak a validation and an affirmation of the movement for justice that is currently happening in every corner of the world to affirm the value of Black lives and just recognize that that's the moment that we're currently in. And know that that means that a lot of people here on the call with us are working on that in a lot of different ways. And we're all also sheltering still in homes to reduce the risk of transmission of this pandemic that we're in. And so it feels that we are in a time of multiple health crises, of really recognizing and moving to the front burner the epidemic of racism, while also mitigating the epidemic of COVID-19 at the same time. So there's so many things happening in the world. This is a unique geopolitical moment. But it also, before any of this really unfolded, 2020 was going to be a pretty phenomenal and unique moment in history for Quaker voluntary service, even without all of the moments in history that we're currently experiencing. And so this really is an exciting time for us to share with you what we are doing as an organization. I feel called to also hearken back to the root of the word emergency and how that word comes from the same root as the word emergent, and this notion of emergence of new things, new opportunities, new seedlings sprouting forth from the ground. And so I think it's a really also exciting time to be thinking about what is possible for our future. So I'm really excited to help to present all of this with you. and share with you all of the things that Quaker Voluntary Service is doing right now and what is on our horizon. It's an unprecedented time for nonprofits. We have incredible success stories that are unique to our current moment that we want to share with you. You know, we are really making the transition from being a scrappy, nimble, new startup organization to being a really established part of the Quaker institutional world. And so that is something that I'm really excited for Hilary and I to share with you. And this is also going to be an opportunity for you to share ideas with each other and with us. So this is not just a presentation. This will be a chance for many directions of sharing and ideas. So Hilary, did you want to take on the next slide?
Yeah, sure do. So hello, I'm Hilary. I use she and her pronouns. If you don't know me, I'm the current executive director of Quaker Voluntary Service, and I formerly was the Boston coordinator for Quaker Voluntary Service. So I've been with QVS since 2015, and it's been a real joy. We want to just be really upfront about what our goals are for our time together so that we can meet those goals together. First, share the bird's eye view of how QVS is and what the history has been that has gotten us to this time, to 2020. We have programmatic and financial shifts that we've needed to make and because of COVID-19, and wanted to update you about those. This is also a really amazing opportunity for you all to meet each other. Many of you are not in the same place. I know that there are friends from all the way West Coast, all the way East Coast, and we'll have some small group time where you'll actually really get to spend time with one another. And that's also an opportunity. We have some questions for you that we want to hear your answers to. We want to do discernment together. We want to hear from you as supporters, as people who are invested in the work of Quaker Voluntary Service. It's so important to us to get to have a real relationship with you. And just like looking at all your faces, it makes me want to cry with joy. So it's an opportunity for us to connect. And then to just be present. And I'm so glad, Damon, that you started with some worship, some time of just breathing together. And so we'll remember to do that throughout. And if you have any questions, you can write in the chat directly to Claire Hannafal, and she can help you out. She's the amazing development and outreach coordinator for Quaker Voluntary Service and a QVS alum.
All right, can we go? Oh, there we go. All right. So, you know, just to remind folks of the QVS model and sort of where we are at the moment, you know, so the QVS program and financial model is based on relationships, capacity building in our partner organizations, and spirit-led transformation. You know, QVS is so many things. It's an opportunity for fellows to engage in a transformational spiritual community service year, but it's also an opportunity for us to work effectively in communities to advance movements for justice nationwide. And so, you know, we really can see that, right? It costs about $33,000 a year per fellow per year. And site placements, nonprofits that we partner with, cover half of this cost. The other cost comes from donors, right? And so we then spend staff time dedicated to supporting fellows, local Quakers, friends, and local communities. And what we see here is really a ripple effect outwards. And so, you know, the work, for example, that the Quaker Voluntary Service Fellow does at my nonprofit where I work at Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility helps to advance our work to be responsive and advancing the justice movements in Portland and in Oregon. So when Quaker Voluntary Service is both impacting the lives of fellows that are in the program, but it also means that we can add much needed capacity to nonprofits that are doing transformational work nationwide. And so I feel particularly excited about Quaker Voluntary Service in this moment in time because it is a way for us to be both nurturing the lives of young people directly in the programs while also contributing to so many different important movements for justice. And Hilary has some really cool information to share on how we've really grown the organization over time to be able to do that on a much bigger scale.
Thank you. So this is the bird's eye view of the finances, and I think it's an amazing graph that tells a lot of information. So the dark blue color is our annual fund that's made up of individuals and gifts from monthly meetings and yearly meetings. The light blue is grants and foundations, and the green is the fee, the income from site placements. The yellow is the interest on our from our investments, and the orange shows how many fellows we have. So if you're looking at the left side, that's money. If you're looking at the right side, that's the number of fellows. So as you can see, the fiscal year 13, we started out with just a couple fellows in one city in Atlanta, and the founder of Quaker Voluntary Service is here with us. Hello, Christina. And so many of the people who helped to start QVS on the board and through your support are also here, and I'm glad to get to see you. So that first year, there was a surge of excitement and energy, and then we look and we see this steady growth of the annual fund, individuals who are giving monthly meetings, yearly meetings, who are seeing the importance of the work that QVS is doing. Apologies if you can hear the sirens in the background. And also the increase in the site placement fees when we have more fellows and more nonprofits we're working with. And we've just consistently grown. One thing we were noticing today is we've never decreased the number of fellows and fellowship positions we have. Now we have 36, and it means that we will have over 200 alumni at the end of this program year. And I was realizing in 3 years, we'll have over 300 alumni because we've just grown so much. And so there, I have some information about alumni in a little bit, but that's kind of the big picture around the finances.
So I want to talk a little bit about the campaign for Quaker Voluntary Service, Rooted, Grounded, and Growing. And actually, Claire, if you could take one last look at that bar graph from the last slide real quick, I'd just like to point out that you can see that the annual fund, back a couple, there we go. You can see that the annual fund, that dark blue, has really grown a lot, really steadily and consistently over the years. And that's really no mistake, that's no accident. There's been a lot of really dedicated, amazing work done on this unique campaign for Quaker Voluntary Service. So now we can move on to the next slide where I'll talk more about that. This campaign has been really extraordinary. Over the course of 4 years, we set out to raise $2.2 million to very radically transform Quaker Voluntary Service out of that startup phase and into a well-grounded foundation organization. So really, we are bolstering the organization's strength and foundation while also massively expanding our visibility and presence within the world of the Religious Society of Friends, inviting more people to become acquainted with our work, and also deepening the work that we do by hiring more staff to support national cohesion, deepening what program offerings we can do for each of the local site cities, and also invest in new equity-based work and opportunities. We've also managed to seed an endowment, which is a really exciting new phase for our organization that gives us a really amazing amount of stability. And with a campaign goal of $2.2 million, we have only 5% left to raise. That's just $80,000, and we got to raise that by July 31st. So maybe you all can help us get there by donating yourself or helping us reach new people who haven't given to the campaign yet. But you know, I really love the framing of our campaign, this rooted, grounded, and growing framework, because that framing to me really shows and demonstrates what we've been doing with this campaign, which is extending our roots so that we have a much more solid footing, so that we are able to sustain the work that we have been doing well and also move forward and grow new shoots into the world and do more and really increase our impact. So we're very close to being done with this campaign, but I wanted to share that it has so far been a really rousing success. I also want to, now pivot to handing the microphone back to Hilary to talk about what we've been doing in the COVID-19 pandemic and how we have sort of transitioned and pivoted to help support the new priorities that have come at us in this very challenging time. So I'll pass it back to you, Hilary.
Yeah. So there's a global pandemic, in case you hadn't heard, and it is, I think all of you know about our program. There are between 6 and 8 young adults living together in community. They're working at nonprofits, and they're engaging with Quaker spiritual deepening tools. And so as it became clear that COVID-19 is here, and it's here for some time, the priorities that we wanted to name are these two, both community health and safety and spirit-led discernment. And neither of these were so far away from what we were already prioritizing, and particularly spirit-led discernment. That's been a pillar of the work of fellows since the beginning. One of the tools that fellows start using at the very beginning of the year is Quaker business practice tools. They are also engaging in peer clearness committees and general discernment with one another and in community. So these two work together. Fellows were encouraged to discern as a community what they needed in order to keep themselves and one another safe. And each of the houses has done that in somewhat different ways, but all in ways that really attest to their commitment to one another and to the future. We've had a lot of shifts in our programming, of course. We have gone all virtual, all digital. We've always been a program that spans a lot of geographic distance. So for staff, that wasn't new, but it was new for fellows, and it's really different to provide emotional support, spiritual support, and guidance over Zoom. Most of the site placements, almost all of them, transitioned to working online as well. So there, 6 or 7 or 8 fellows in a house are now all working from home. They're hanging out together all the time, and have done that really successfully. Some of the financial shifts, we applied for and received the Paycheck Protection Program fund. And so that has been a real relief to me of feeling grounded in our finances. It's meant restricted travel. I may have emailed you or called you in the past couple months saying, I was planning on coming to your city and I'm really sad I don't get to do that. And so now moving to virtual donor visits, and Claire and I have had a real joy of getting to connect more with friends, supporters, local support committee members, fellows across the cities virtually. And I'll talk about this a little bit in the next slide, but so far I feel like we're really presenting the strength and the joy of QVS, and there's also decreased fundraised income this year and some decreased expenses for fellows, but this is an economic crisis and we are also experiencing that. So some of the particular impacts of COVID-19 on our financials, I've had some wonderful conversations with friends, with supporters and donors about just shifting capacity and shifting leadings, and a decrease in the number of gifts and also in the size of gifts. So that's just a fact. I don't have judgment about it, but something that we're really aware of as we near the end of our fiscal year. Our site placements, the nonprofits that we work with, have an increased need. And I've heard stories about the fellows who are really flat out at their site placements. They are working really hard at healthcare clinics and at immigration organizations, supporting people who are really feeling the direct impacts of COVID-19 and the economic and health crisis that comes with it. And we're also seeing a shift in our nonprofit partners. We've had the highest number ever of nonprofits that had to discern that they couldn't work with us this upcoming year. And I would say for my staff on the call, the coordinators have done an absolutely incredible job of recruiting more nonprofits to work with. So we will still have 36 fellowship positions this upcoming year, But it's been a real challenge and a real expensive time and energy. And we're gonna miss getting to work with the nonprofits that we were expecting to work with or that we've worked with in the past. So over to you, Damon.
Sure, thanks. And I really just want to echo what Hilary was saying about how incredible the fellows have been in this crisis. I mean, I've seen them reaching out to each other. I've seen them reaching out to the communities that they serve in, and just going above and beyond to really show up for people who are feeling isolated in the ways that they can, and also really taking care to, be as mindful of their own health and the ways that they could be impacting other people's health. And I see a deep amount of compassion and respect for, being as responsible as possible in this like impossible circumstance that many of them find themselves now in. And I've been glad to see that staff have been flexible with fellows, right, in being okay with, if somebody's immunocompromised, them taking some more space from the intentional community portion of the QVS year, right? So I like the fact that we've been, really pivoting and being flexible and working with people to help best support them in this just really unbelievable time. And I know, from the I can speak to the Portland Fellows from personal experience that, that picture we saw a couple slides ago was them out in the streets, like taking chalk to sidewalks to help get the word out about important campaigns for justice. Just finding all sorts of ways to be creative and to pivot into succeeding and doing the work that they're doing in a new way. So that's been amazing. So strategies for weathering the crisis, I do want to talk a little bit about what we're thinking of in terms of going forward. I really feel like when we look at the history of Quakerism in the world, we look at things like the American Friends Service Committee's work in Europe in the post-World War II Reconstruction time. Quaker service is most needed when the world is in a time of crisis. And so I believe very deeply and passionately that this is going to be our moment that really defines us as an organization. And that how we respond in this moment of time will really, make an enormous impact on the world. And the program that we offer to both fellows and the communities they serve in is needed now more than ever. And young adults are likely going to be impacted very severely in terms of their economic opportunities and job prospects after a year spent with QVS, for example. And we know that a lot of people in the nonprofit sector are experiencing some form of economic hardship, maybe not hiring as many people, maybe laying some people off, or having to close their doors because of the drastic circumstances. But there's also a lot of increased need, right? So helping our fellows and site placements to help meet that need is a really essential thing at this point in time. So we really are committed to continuing support to the communities that we serve. And that's why it's so important too that we've introduced this sliding scale payment for site placements so that they can continue to receive fellow support without necessarily needing to pay the full amount if they're really struggling. We have had to also make some hard decisions. One of the things that I loved in my QVS year was getting to go to conferences, Quaker conferences. And that was something that QVS footed the bill for, and we're having to lay that down for the moment, so that we can really make sure that we are bolstering the things that have to happen. Similarly, we can't have a national orientation at Pendle Hill this year. And so we're going to have to adapt what it looks like to orient our new fellows, and switch to using community building tools across Zoom and in local cities. And figure out new ways to really invest in relationship building and helping prepare fellows for the movement building work that they're going to do. So it has meant some very challenging things, right? But we are really committed to continuing those relationship building practices across distance, whether it's donors, yearly and monthly meetings of friends, other Quaker organizations, etc. And really a huge part of the strategy for weathering the crisis is we want to invite you to help us discern how to do this, right? How can we figure out how to bolster our resources and get through this while still meeting our mission in every way? And so we're going to be looking to you today to help us, figure out how do we lean into donor work in a way that's going to get us through this. So all of that is a little bit grim, but Hilary now has some really exciting news to share. There's lots of new stuff that's been happening and big successes. So that's the next slide.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a lot of good news, and one is that we had our second highest number of recruits this year, applicants this year, of over 90 individuals who wanted to do Quaker voluntary service, which is wonderful for us. So many of the applicants hear about QVS from a current fellow or an alum. I think that really speaks to the program. We've also the board discerned this past November to increase the salary and hours of local coordinators, understanding that coordinators really spend closer to 25 or more hours per week on QVS and not just the 20 that they had been previously compensated for. And I also really want to name that in a lot of Quaker religious communities, we're not very good at financially supporting ministry. And we see the work of our staff as ministry, the work of providing experiences for young adults, of bringing more justice to the world. And I'm proud that we get to do that together. We had an amazing experience working with the Pickett Fund, Clarence and Lily Pickett Fund. And before I was hired, another team of fantastic people, of Christina and Claire and Leanne, applied for and received 62% of the dispersal of the Clarence and Lily Pickett Fund when they laid themselves down. And so we've seeded an endowment, and that endowment now holds over $400,000, and that's really mind-boggling. And one of our fundraising supports and consultants, when the campaign was talked about several years ago, said, normally I would never suggest to an organization as young as you to start an endowment, but the support for QVS made him feel like it was a worthwhile endeavor, and it has proved to be so. As Damon mentioned earlier, we're just 5% away from completing this huge fundraising goal of an additional $2.2 million over the last 4 years. Wow, there's still more exciting news. I had to take a breath. And then two other things. One is we also are going to be embarking on an alumni engagement project. So when QVS was started, there were only 7 alumni, and then the next year 20 alumni, and now all of a sudden we have almost 200. And we're realizing we want to stay connected with young adults as they're continuing vocational and spiritual journeys. And for a lot of our alum, I think we are a bridge between Quakerism and themselves. And so how do we really own that as an organization? And we've been blessed by a lot of amazing staff that have stayed in touch with alums and wanting to have that be a part of the organization as opposed to an additional piece that staff do. And lastly, we just decided, as the board discerned, to buy the property in Boston that we have been renting since 2015. And it was a big and hard decision, and also feels so exciting to get to really invest in that space and continue the relationship that we have with the landlords, who are a Quaker couple and who are really dedicated to the mission of QVS. So that's all pretty excellent and makes me feel really good. And yeah, so we are, I guess I want to take a pause because I said that we're gonna, Damon said we were gonna be grounded and maybe just have a deep breath or two and be here now together. And we're going to get into small groups in just a minute, and wanting to ask before we do that, are there any questions? I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Are there any questions that you feel like, oh, I think that this is an obvious answer that Hilary and Damon just didn't mention, this important thing? So I'm wondering, are there any questions that seem like it would be really useful for us all to hear the answers to them before we get into small groups where you'll also get to wrestle with some questions? Maybe I made that too high of a bar for questions. Lower it by like 20%. I love working with Quakers because the silences are long.
I'll give you a question.
Yeah.
At the end of our fiscal year, we would send money that has not been otherwise allocated to national. The end of our fiscal year will coincide with the end of your fiscal year. I mean, the national, of course. Would it help if we sent that money earlier? If
Are you talking about from your meeting?
From the local support committee, the money we have for helping run the program?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think if you have a sense of what that amount will be before the end of July, we would welcome to know that. Yeah, thank you. Good question.
I don't have a question. I'm just sort of like, wow, hearing that you're buying the Dorchester house.
Yeah. We're buying the Dorchester house. Pat and Bruce, who are on this screen, are our Boston area friends and have been to that house many times. I'm excited to get to really invest in the garden, which I know Pat has always wanted.
Say, Hilary, could you explain a little more of the rationale for buying the house? I mean, in the past, based on the recommendations that we got from our sister organizations, they said never buy real estate. But how is it that this feels like rightly led and a good decision for the organization?
Thank you. That's a great question. So I think it's twofold. One is we're very committed to Boston and being in the Boston area. And that house has been a place of a lot of spiritual depth for over 25 years. And when the landlords let us know that they needed to sell the house, that they were really permanently moving to DC, they offered to sell it to us at a discount from what they were going to put it on the market for. And that's, you know, I said earlier, getting to have this relationship with people who are really invested in QVS, that's a part of it. There's a financial, a big financial gift of making this house more affordable for us. The other thing is that real estate in Boston is otherwise very unaffordable. And so if we want to stay here and make it sustainable, actually buying the house is a really smart decision fiscally. And we've had the joy of having a board member who has been managing that house for us for a number of years, Hugh Gelch, who's on this call. And we know that house really well. And that makes a big difference. We're also really invested in this neighborhood, and I see some wonderful spirit-led opportunity for engaging even more in Dorchester as a neighborhood. So I think those are some of them. I feel like I'm missing some of the main reasons. Yeah, Damon.
Could I jump in? Yeah, so I feel like there were a couple of things when the board was discerning this that really jumped out to me, and one of them was, this was a really unique circumstance. This was, not really comparable to going out and just looking on the real estate market for something we could buy for a QVS house. And B, the rental market in Boston is uniquely challenging, right? When we look for places that are good houses for the QVS fellows, we need them to be places where they can use public transit to get to their site placements. It has to be something that is affordable enough for us as an organization that it's a sustainable amount of rent on a monthly basis. And it needs to be able to comfortably fit everybody. And there are not a lot of places that tick all those categories, especially in Boston. And it also, I think, really connects to our goal of the campaign of growing our roots as an organization, because now, because of the generosity of the folks who sold this to us or made the offer to us of selling this house at a much below market rate, it allows us to really lock in something that we can then invest in over time. This is a rare and unique opportunity for us, and it actually means we're going to be paying a lot less on a monthly basis than we would for rent at a comparable property by a huge degree. And so that it was just a very unique opportunity for us to actually be then spending in our line item month-to-month budget on something that actually is an investment in our resources overall as an organization. So that felt like enough for the board that it was rightly ordered to move forward with this as sort of an exception to that general rule of thumb that buying property as a nonprofit, it can be a little risky.
So Damon, are you saying that your mortgage payments are going to be very significantly less than what you were paying to rent? And are you also figuring in the cost of maintaining the property?
Yeah, Hugh Gelch, who is on our board, has been managing this property for, oh my gosh, how long, Hugh? So long. So that also gave us a very unique insight into being able to calculate those costs and, you know, give a very comprehensive projection of what all of those costs would be, even in the event of some rainy days and things like that. And so it felt like it was enough of a savings, even given all of those things considered, that it would be still worth moving forward on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. For those who haven't been there, it's a beautiful place for QVS house. There are basically there's 7 bedrooms, although one house that there are some alumni from that year decided to make an 8th bedroom. Yes, hello, Jeremy and Sangeeta. I don't know who else is here. Brenda, that they made a 3-season porch into a bedroom. So there were 8 bedrooms for the 8 fellows. It was very nice and has a nice yard, and it's just been a really good spot for us. I also want to make sure, are there any other questions, not just about this slide, although I could say much more about all the things here, but just any other questions or things that would be helpful for us all to hear before we get into small groups?
Hilary, can I say something about the Pickett Endowment a little bit further? Would that be okay?
Yes, please.
So hi, everyone. I'm Christina, for those of you that don't know me, and I a little bit more about the context of the endowment that QVS has started. And for those of you who, you know, have been supporters of QVS from the beginning, it might seem like a lot that we started an endowment, but the Pickett Endowment for Quaker Leadership was started by supporters and family members of Clarence and Lily Pickett to offer opportunities for young adults to engage in the legacy of Quaker service. And so for many years, they gave small grants to young adult friends, and many of us who have been part of QVS were recipients of that support. And when they decided to lay down the endowment, because other Quaker organizations were carrying forward the work of supporting young adults in ways that they really couldn't as a volunteer board, they identified QVS and a couple of other organizations as well to receive those remaining funds. And I just wanted to say, I'd mention that again because I feel like it's so important that we understand that QVS is now established as one of the main organization that's solely dedicated to supporting young adult friends and to carrying forward this legacy of Quaker service that we've always seen ourselves as part of, as picking up on this history and tradition of Quaker service from American Friends Service Committee and Philadelphia Yearly Meeting work camps and other places where we've seen that legacy. And this investment from the Pickett Endowment in the future of QVS, I think, is another signal that is how we, as we always hoped we would be, and we hoped we would be seen and understood in that way, that we are being seen and understood in that way by a much broader network of friends. And so I think it's just such an exciting moment in the history of QVS, almost 10 years later, that we have received this support for our role in carrying forward the legacy of Quaker service, and particularly in supporting young adults in that service and that legacy. So it's, I think it's just a really important marker of where QVS is as an organization. So thank you all for all of you who made that happen. But I just wanted to just lift that up as part of the legacy of Quaker service that we carry forward.
Thank you.
And I believe it's going to be continued to be called the Pickett Endowment as well, honoring the two of them and the incredible work that they did in leadership that we've been honored as QVS to carry on.
That's right.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
And Christina, our founding executive director, has been continuing on our campaign committee, and we are so grateful for her. Yeah, I really am so glad you said that, Christina, because it feels, I do not take it lightly. It feels to me like an incredible affirmation of what Quaker Voluntary Service is doing. It's such an honor.
Thank you. Oh, Claire, did you mean to share your screen again? Great, thanks. So we're gonna head into small group time, and in each of your groups there will be somebody who's kind of facilitating, either a staff or a board member, and those people know who that they are. And just a reminder, if you can record your small group sessions, that would be great, because we won't be sharing that more widely, but it would be wonderful for staff to get to really dig into what you all are talking about and be present with you, even though I wish I could be in all of the groups. I can't, but I'll get to be in one. And so we have a couple of questions. First, we'd like everybody to introduce themselves. You can say your name if you'd like, pronouns, where you're calling from, your spiritual community, and what your connection is to QVS. And then these questions to consider. Do you have any clarifying questions about what we've just been talking about during this first while? How do these programming updates fit within your understanding of QVS? And really wanted to hear from you more about what you know about QVS and how it does or does not mesh with what we've been talking about. And third, how do you as a supporter hope to see QVS grow? And one question I often ask friends in my network or my circles is, what are factors that we should be considering as we discern for the future? And so what are factors that QVS staff should have in mind? What are factors that the board should have in mind as we continue moving through 2020, this year of rebirth and growth and challenge and everything in between? We'd love to hear from you what you think.
A deep note of gratitude for everyone making space and time for this session. And I feel just much more connected to you all as a result of it. And I'm so grateful for that. Connection is so hard to come by in quarantine times. And so I'm very grateful for that. There are some ways to give on this slide. And I just want to make a personal pitch that I really see giving to QVS as a form of tithing for me. And I see it as a very essential accompaniment to the direct mutual aid support that I am giving to people protesting and Black-led organizations. I feel that those donations are especially important right now. And, you know, I really see them not as mutually exclusive, but really in good accompaniment to a donation to QVS. So I hope that you will consider continuing your financial support, or perhaps beginning your financial support, and also talking to your friends and fellow members of your Quaker spiritual community, or other neighbors and so on and so forth, to consider giving to QVS as well. Hilary, do you want to say anything else to sort of wrap up?
Well, you can see the many different ways that we accept gifts, and so you can spread that to your communities as well. And like I said before, I've really been loving getting to connect with supporters and local friends across the country. It is one of the joys of not traveling and getting to have virtual coffee dates through the computer. So please reach out. You can email me. It's Hilary with 1 L at quakervoluntaryservice.org. And I'd love to be in touch with you and hope to get to know many of you better.
thank you all for being a part of this Quaker Voluntary Service extended community. It is so wonderful to be with you this evening. And please be well, please be safe and healthy and take care of yourselves and each other and make space for rest, and hope to connect with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.